Hey everyone, it's Joe. Welcome to another episode of the Future Business Analyst podcast. My guest today is Vicky Di Ciacca, Managing Director at Be Positive. Vicky established Be Positive 19 years ago and helps a range of customers in the UK and beyond to build their BA capabilities. So Vicky, thank you for joining me today.
A pleasure.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. Building business analysis capabilities, and I think we've got quite a few questions to cover today about building those into this sort of unknown future. But maybe we can start with a bit of background about you. How did you land up in business analysis, and what still keeps you in this profession?
So I actually landing in business analysis is quite an interesting question. So I started as a programmer at IBM, but the reason I became a programmer was because I had an interview to be an accountant, and I actually fell over on my way out of the interview. So I did literally fall into an IT profession because accountancy didn't work out. But as I said, I started as a programmer at IBM, and I had a real fascination with modelling. It was modelling was the thing that caught me, and it was sort of being able to take a complex system or a complex problem and breaking it down. And even today, I'll find myself producing data models or process models to try and make sense of complexity and complex problems. And so I remember sort of being delayed once at an airport and trying to work out why they couldn't just use the planes that were on the runway, and using a data model to work that out because of the type of plane, the route, the pilot, the skills of the pilot. And trying to do that. So that's what keeps me in business analysis. It's that real enjoyment of solving problems and working with people to solve the problems. But yeah, that's how I literally fell into business analysis.
Fell into it, okay. And yeah, it's trying to understand the complex problems and how to solve them as well, I think, isn't it? I was talking to somebody today actually about data, and we were discussing where data is visible in the world, and actually airports came up because you get the departure boards that give you all of those sort of planes and times and destinations and all of those attributes. And I know when you completed the survey, one of the things that you picked out for perhaps being one of these future trends is data. Tell me a little bit more about what you see and how you see data being such a major future trend.
Yeah, I think for a long time, data was really difficult. It was really, really hard. And there were so many stories in the press around failed data warehousing and data mining projects. So lots of organizations tried to do it, and there just wasn't the technology there really to support data, particularly the volumes of data that you need in order to be able to spot patterns and spot trends. And I think that's one of the big technological changes is the ability to store, manipulate, and understand data that's meaningful, because data itself isn't meaningful. As we all know, we need to look at it, we need to analyze it, we need to turn it into information, we need to gain knowledge from that information. So I think it's about using data for organizations to make good decisions. And as business analysts, I think we can help in a number of different ways. One is understanding what decisions need to be made by asking the questions that are insightful at the very heart of business decisions, but then also making sense of ambiguity where we've got just the data that doesn't really mean anything, spotting patterns, being able to solve problems with the data, and to be able to really make sense of just stuff. So if we have all that stuff, how do we frame a question that will help make sense of that stuff? We've been doing a lot of work around AI, chat GPT, and it will throw up all sorts of stuff. And I asked it when I was talking, I was coming to talk to you, I asked it what's a future business analysis, and it does throw up lots of things. But the key thing, I think, and that really stands us in good stead as business analysts is asking the right questions, and is knowing questions to ask of the data, because the data is the data. If we trust it, we trust it, but we really need to be able to know which questions are going to give us the answers that are going to help us. And I think as business analysts, that's one of our core skills and one of the core things that will mark us out from everybody else when it comes to sort of future trends, particularly in technology and the changes there.
Yeah, I mean, you said quite a lot in there. There's like 3 or 4 things I actually want to unpack with you, and I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure which sequence to do it in. But let me start with this data thing because that's where we started, right? And I really like what you said, starting with the end in mind, like what decisions need to be made. And if we know what decisions, then what kind of data would you need to see to be able to make that decision? And we can almost work backwards from there. And when you mentioned about storing, manipulating, and showing the data, you gave that full life cycle as well, which I think is fantastic because there's all this focus on sort of data analytics, business intelligence stuff like that. But people often forget that stuff on there needed to come from somewhere in the first place, right? It needed to be captured into a system. So do you see BA sort of taking responsibility of that full sort of spread from the moment that we're going to capture it in some form of sort of interface? I don't even want to say an IT system anymore. Who knows what this interface is going to be? But we capture it all the way through to the moment that it's displayed to somebody to make a decision.
Yeah, and it comes down to requirements. It absolutely comes down to requirements. So I was chatting to one of the BAs that I work with yesterday, and we were saying so it really doesn't matter how you frame the requirements or the user stories. He was doing some user story mapping, so it really doesn't matter how you frame it. What you need to be able to do is to think through all the different the different stages in that process, and it is what we were talking about there is that process, that life cycle of and it's a good old-fashioned CRUD, isn't it?
It
You
is,
create it,
right?
you use it, you delete it, and
Yeah,
that's it's stuff we've been doing for 20, 30 years. But
yeah,
it's about how, and I think this again is one of the things around the future trends is taking some of those basic building blocks and not
yeah,
forgetting them and applying them against whatever technologies or whatever it is that we're looking at as business analysts. And yeah, as a BA, we can what we should be doing, and it's a bit of a cliche, but having that toolbox of BA
yeah.
skills that we still can use regardless of the technology that we're working with.
Yeah. And yeah, we're talking about this data, and I'm thinking we work it backwards. As you say, there's a life cycle. It's like good old CRUD, and CRUD isn't going to change, right? CRUD is going to be
Yeah.
CRUD for forever, it seems. Do you see things like, I mean, Dharma, there's the data group, they've got the DM, BOC, and things. Do you perhaps see like business analysts getting involved in some of these other bodies of knowledge, needing to sort of leverage that? I'm now thinking like data management, data quality management, as much as you give that information, it needs to be like cleansed, it needs to
Yes.
be, it needs to be correct. Might we see a shift that we don't have this entirely like BA box focus, but we bring in some other box too?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's across a number of different things. I think there's data. I think there's automation.
Yeah.
So I think when I started as a BA, it was very much around. So I started back in the 1990s, and and it was very much automation of large scale processes. Really, that's what we were doing. So automation really not being anything new, but I think now with it's that integration of data and process and AI and machine learning and all of those sorts of
Mm,
things. So I think as BAs, there's a huge. I think we've got our core BA stuff,
mm,
but then I think that needs to sort of have tentacles out into other things like data, like automation, like and probably some stuff that we don't know about yet. I mean, the
yeah,
augmented reality, I mean, is is
yeah,
is is
yeah,
just there on the fringes, isn't it? And
yeah,
then the stuff that we don't know yet that
yeah,
that we're going to have to. But I think as BAs, we've got a responsibility to inform ourselves about some of those areas that we need to know about and be aware of the ethics that are involved as well. I
mm,
think, particularly with data is one of the places where ethics becomes really important because of how we're using them. And we've got legislation about how we use data, how long we keep data for, what we're doing with it, who's got access to it. And I think we need to be informed about all of those, particularly around the ethical considerations when it comes to something like data. So bodies of knowledge in those other domains, I think it's vital for us to be informed about them.
Yeah, and I just wanted to throw in security with that too as well. I feel like that's going to be another big thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's go. I mean, you mentioned augmented AI, and I'm not going on much of a technology trend necessarily. We'll go wherever you steer the conversation. But what you said that was really important in there is what we don't know yet. Like, there is this stuff. They predict that there's going to be more change in the next, I think it's 50 years than there's been in the last 10,000 years. The change that we can expect, I don't think we can expect. We've got absolutely no idea about what's coming. And another one of the things that you said in your response here was wider knowledge of tech, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like yes, we sort of need to know what's out there, what's available, what we can do with it. But I feel like we also need to try and look a bit further, not be as reactive like when this thing hits us. I mean, ChatGPT hit us, right? And then suddenly everyone's on that bandwagon, but nobody was really ahead of that wagon, right? Everyone was sort of behind. So do you think that into the future as BAs, we could perhaps have more of an eye on the horizon than we've got now?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I do some work with one of the universities here in Edinburgh, and I was chatting to some of the lecturers that work with the computer science students, and they said in the first year of a degree they don't always know what they're going to teach in the last year of a degree because things are changing that quickly. I think as business analysts, what we need to be able to do is have the skills and techniques to be able to cope with whatever's being thrown at us. So I think we need that wider view. We need to see the horizon. If we can make sure that we're sort of we've got that sort of wider view ourselves, but we've got the tools and techniques so we can pick things up quickly. We've got we can use methodologies that is technology agnostic. We can adapt. So I think adaptability is going to be one of the big mindsets that we need to have. So when I started data modeling, it was entity relationship diagrams, and then we've moved into class models. But some of those basics of data, understanding data modeling and data structures, if we can take those and understand them well enough to apply them to whatever's coming next. So it's having those core BA skills. It's knowing that technology will change. It's having an adaptable mindset and being able to apply whatever that is to whatever comes next.
Yeah. It's a bit like we're going to have different means to do the same things that we've always done, right?
Yeah.
Business is sort of business. So we know that there are customers. We know that there are products and services that we need to serve them with through processes using data. So just different tools, same end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where it's really interesting for us, and I think this is one of the things that the pandemic really brought to life, was how, as business analysts, we can use technology in our business analysis. So the whole idea of workshops. So I think workshops is one of the great examples of when we used to hang around. We used to have all of these post-it type things. I've got my different color post-its. And these were the tools of our trade. So we'd have our brown paper, we'd have our marker pens. I do have my marker pens next to me as well. So we'd have all of those things, and we'd rock up to a workshop and we'd say, right, let's map this process. We'd have a break, we'd have a cup of tea, we'd come back, we'd carry on mapping our process. So what I think the pandemic forced us to do was to really think about how we use technology. So how can we use virtual collaboration tools? So we at Be Positive, we use Miro quite a lot, because that's the tool that we use for our virtual workshops. But we've got some people who are now really, really good at doing Miro, and are able to use that in the same way that I've been using these sorts of things for 20, 30 years. And so I think for us, that's a really exciting thing, that we can start to use technology in a way that that the pandemic sort of forced us into and it widens the scope of what we can do. We can talk to stakeholders in different places. We can work from home, which might suit people in different circumstances. So we can. I think using, and that's just one example. So that facilitation of remote workshops, one example of where technology will really help us in our job, and it's not just about the technology that our customers are using, because some of that it will be, I think, sort of crystal ball type territory. But if we can harness some of that for ourselves, and even things like, ChatGPT, it is the thing that is a thing at the moment. But what we can use it for is to, if we're going to see a customer or see a new user or a different part of an organization, say we're going to work on a regulatory project, we can maybe get some key things that and it'll speed up the process. It doesn't actually replace the process, because we still need to go and find things out. We need to go and talk to people. We need to elicit all those good requirements. But we can maybe start things off quicker, and we can speed things up. So I think we do need to be careful, use these things with care. But I think it is quite exciting that we can maybe use things in a different way and become users of technology rather than sort of that sort of sitting in between the business and IT, which is what BAs have sort of, we move around a wee bit, but it's that sort of in between business and IT. But I think that's one of the big changes as well, is those lines are blurred. So we don't have, the BA doesn't now, I don't think, sit between business and IT. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think a lot of organizations, particularly if you look at financial services organizations, the solutions that they give their customers are technology solutions. They're not banking solutions. The tech is so embedded in what they do that the two aren't separate anymore. And then I think the other thing, which I think is a big change for that sort of sitting between the business and IT, is digital natives coming into the workplace. So people that are coming in that are sort of early career have used technology, and I'm blown away with how they work, how quick they I've been working sort of in IT since the 1990s, which is actually 4 decades, which makes me feel very old.
Is it 4? Gosh, okay.
Well, they'll work this out. So it's the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, and the 2020s. So it covers 4 decades, which is quite scary. But
there's this point in your career when you write down and like the number of years you want to like embellish and show, and then you reach this point where you go, actually, I wish these would just slow down a bit now.
Yeah, you can see why Hollywood stars embellish their or change their ages to really get to a certain point. But I think that so the early career BAs that are coming in now have such an appreciation of technology that wasn't there sort of 10, 15 years ago. Because everybody uses they use it at school, they use it at college, everybody, and it's not seen as something different. Whereas I'm still amazed I can take photos on my iPhone. I mean that still blows my mind. But that's what people have grown up with, that are now coming into the workplace, that are people that are involved on projects.
And I was thinking about when you mentioned that in your response, I was thinking about that. I was thinking this is really interesting, and I had a couple of questions on it. So one, I feel like the word to maybe use for them is dexterity. They've got this amazing dexterity with tech. Like, even if I use a silly example of my son's remote control for his Xbox, the number of buttons on there compared to the number of buttons I had to play with when I was growing up, it's like 4 times as many. And he just, when I'm like clumsily trying to do this thing, he just laughs at me, and he's just got such dexterity to do it. I watch some of this social media stuff, and they've got these apps, and suddenly we've got captions, and we've got memes and all this stuff going on. And somebody created that in probably 20 minutes. I'd take half a day to do something like that. It's ridiculous. So, as you say, we've got these people coming in who are so au fait, so skilled with technology. They're possibly more skilled than the BAs in some way.
Yeah.
So either, and these were the sort of two angles that I saw on this. If I can find it, but one, they might not need you because they can solve their problems themselves,
Yeah.
right? They know about the tools and they can do that. So they can say, well, I've
Yeah.
got this problem. Let me just get on and fix it. I mean, they're going to be like a proxy BA, really,
Yeah.
solving their
Yeah.
own problems. And the second thing is, if they can do that, but they still have problems to solve, then they're going to expect a lot more from you as a
Yeah.
BA than what you can currently provide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think the latter is really important, and I think that's where, as BAs, and I think it's having partly it's about being confident in what we do. So it's not just about IT. It's that holistic view. I mean, that's
Yeah.
again, it's another bit of a cliche, but it's that thing that says, well, that might solve your IT problem, but then how's that going to impact the people and the team that you're working with? Or what if you do that? How's that going to affect your customers? So if your customers, and again, this is where ethics maybe comes into things as well. So if you've got an expectation that and then maybe you can share data between systems, then what are the ethical considerations that you need to think about that? So yeah, you can use some sort of interface to transfer information between two systems, but what are the impacts of that on your customers? What are the impacts ethically? Are the regulations that are going to come into force with that? What's the impact on the sort of the wider process? So if you want to share that data, actually, where is it being stored, created, read, updated, deleted? And so bringing in, asking those questions and those challenges to make sure it's not just sort of that bit that the sort of that sort of that dexterity gives them, because I think dexterity is great, but if it's dexterity that gives them that ability to flex in different situations. I think what we need to find, and this is something that my 16-year-old daughter was talking about, is what's our flex. So what's the thing that gives us the difference, the thing for us to say, well, actually that's our flex. And I think what it is, it's that, and it needs to be a genuine flex. It needs to be the
Yeah.
thing that says this is genuinely where we make a difference. And I think it is in that taking a view of the whole impact. So it's not
Yeah.
just that bit that they can solve with their knowledge of technology, their ability to use it. I think it's about making sure that everything links together, and it's called traceability. So it's making
Yeah.
sure that there's a genuine need to do something, and if you've got
Yeah.
that need, is there a justification? Is there a scope for it? Is there the funding for it? How does it impact maybe different parts of the organization? And it's about making sure that that everything's considered, and it's the people, it's the process,
Yeah.
it's any regulations, it's what's that overall change that's needed, not just that bit, the technology
Yeah.
bit, which is important, but there's so much more around it as well.
No, there is. It's that word holistic. There's so much more around it, and I mean, traceability. What we're really doing there is, if we pull on the end of a thread, we can see what else like
Yeah,
moves when we do that. And
yeah,
if people are creating these own solutions, and I've seen that in the past as well. People have created their own solutions in their past in isolation. It becomes unsupported. Nobody really knows what it is, and
yeah.
yeah,
How many of those spreadsheets still exist on people's PCs because
ridiculous.
somebody knows how to do pivot tables,
Really
and
well.
and
Yeah.
so they've got the spreadsheet that
Yeah.
governs the whole department, and the
Yeah.
problems and the risks that causes, and we've seen that. We've got the scars from doing that, and I think that's
Yeah.
where we can bring that that and I think it is those battle scars. I think
Yeah.
particularly for those of us that have been around for a while, it's those battle
Yeah.
scars of knowing
Yeah.
where it's really going to hurt and what the
It
consequences are for doing
it
things in a
will.
particular way.
But the thing about those pivot tables is there isn't a better solution than those pivot tables. The alternative they don't like as much as what they've currently got, and we're sort of saying you need to change, and they're saying, well, we don't want to change to that. We're happy. I'm sure we can have those kind of conversations. So I mean, if we were to like throw our mind forward, and I know that one of those questions that we get asked when we work for other people is, or in an interview maybe, is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And that's an impossible question, but I want to throw something a little more impossible than that at you. What does a day look like for a business analyst in, let's say, 2033, 10 years from now? What do you think that looks like?
2033. So I think I think there'll be lots of things that BAs do that's the same. So we'll be managing stakeholders. I think that's a given. We'll be managing stakeholders. Stakeholders might be different. We might have different sorts of stakeholders that we're managing. We might have stakeholders that know different things, so that so when we're talking to stakeholders, we might need to do some different preparation in advance for talking to them and managing them. So I think we'll still be doing that. I think we'll still be eliciting information. So we will be asking questions, but we might be asking them in different ways, and we might be asking them from different sources. So we might be eliciting information from data stores, as well as from people, as well as from documentation. And our idea of documentation, I think, is going to change as well.
Yeah. I was going to say, will that exist in 10 years' time?
We won't. We'll be storing things different ways. And I think one of the big changes I've seen in analysis is the demise of the requirement specification. So, and user stories. And so regardless of whether people are using Agile or not, capturing requirements as user stories is one of the biggest changes that I've seen in analysis over the last of maybe 10 years. So, so getting away from those requirement specs, business requirements documents, those big thick things, user stories is one of the things where I've seen people using that technique to capture requirements in a different way, regardless of whether they're using Agile or not. Some organizations still like big thick BRD requirements catalogs, but I do see sort of the user stories as being a way of capturing requirements in manageable chunks. I think getting atomic requirements as user stories is a way, particularly for new business analysts, to be able to shape things in that way. Still making sure that that all those good things about requirements are there in the user story. But I think when we're writing requirements, I think user stories will be much more prevalent in terms of the work that we do there. I think business analysts will become much more involved earlier on in the life cycle. So I think some of that strategic analysis will become much, and again, it's about deciding, or it's about helping formulate the decisions that need to be made, the questions that need to be asked, and how we source the answers to those questions, or the information that's going to help us answer those questions. And I think one of the things that we need to do as well is to keep ourselves informed. So I think sort of the continuous learning, the continuous familiarization with sort of what's happening with data, with AI, augmented reality, whatever it is, sort of that constant looking at the horizon that you mentioned earlier. I think we'll need to be doing that. And I think the other thing is that we'll be doing much more remote work as well. And I think sort of that, I think that's now more embedded in the way that we work as business analysts, that we don't necessarily need to be face to face with people, but it'll be face to face, but on a screen, rather than having to rely on stuff. And it does pain me that sort of my store of these won't be used as much as it has been in the past.
I'm sure
I'll find a way.
Yeah,
I will find a way.
they'll still get used. There's still time to meet. There's still time to have workshops and get together. But both work, but also there are other things in the context that require us to get together at times. So post-it notes will get used. There's quite a lot there. But I feel like overall, what we're saying is it pretty much stays the same, but we might be just doing it in different ways. And I'm trying to imagine, like, when you say these things, like, okay, what would that look like? How would that be implemented? And you said something there about, when we're asking questions, we might be asking questions of data. And I'm thinking, yeah, we might have something like Siri or Alexa or something like that. We might be throwing a question at them to say, hey, please go away and tell me how many products were returned faulty for reason X over the last quarter. Yeah, I mean, so our interfaces are almost going to change, and maybe we're asking some questions of technology, like literally asking questions of technology. Yeah, I can see that coming about. Still eliciting, still asking questions. And the other thing you said in there, moving towards more strategic analysis. So I'm just interested for your perspective and opinion there. Are we not doing that already? Are not enough of us doing that already? In your experience, do you think we are, or aren't we fulfilling that?
I think there's a view, and so in my experience, is that you have to be quite experienced as a business analyst to be involved in strategic analysis.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think there's that, but I think that I think my first experience of being involved in that strategic analysis, the thing that surprised me was just how detailed it was. The amount of the detail that we went into. I thought strategic, high level, if you throw up a SciPoc and that's it. But no, it was very, very detailed. And we needed to find out a lot. We needed to find out a lot of stuff to rule stuff out. I think that was one of the things that was a real eye opener. And I think the more that I think it's more that the more that we can get involved at every stage, the better business analyst we are, because we understand what we're picking up and we understand where we're passing it on to.
Yeah.
And I think that line's going to be blurred as well. So I think it's going to be much more that we'll need to be able to be active at wider stages of a project lifecycle, whether that's agile, whether that's waterfall, because I think there probably still is a place for waterfall type projects, whether that's iterative, incremental, whatever it is. I think we'll still have the same skills, but I think we probably need to have a wider exposure to those other stages in the project lifecycle. I think part of it's organizational as well. I think in some organizations that strategic stuff is seen as the domain of the business architect, or the enterprise architect, rather than the BAs in there, and it might be a BA that gets seconded into there. But I think as things change and we become much better at understanding sort of how, and I think this is one of the good things around sort of the way that organizations becoming more reliant on technology, is that there isn't that separation between, say, a business architecture and a technical architecture. It becomes a true enterprise architecture because it's how everything fits together. And I realize I'm not answering your question at all, but
you are.
But I think as business analysts, that bringing together of the technical and the business architecture plays absolutely to our strengths, because that's what we do, and that's what we're good at. It's that bringing everything together. So I think some of it is organizational. I think we need to get rid of that perception of you can only do strategic analysis if you're experienced, because there's a lot of stuff in there, because it is bringing together a lot of that technical.
But it's funny. Let me just hop on. I mean, you've made that statement again, and there was something I wanted to say the first time. So let me just hop on there. It's funny because, I mean, I agree with you. You're right. Like, senior BA does strategic work. Like, you need to become that senior BA if you want to do that kind of thinking. But actually, if you are a fairly green graduate at a big 4 or 5 company, you could well be doing that kind of
Yeah,
work
yeah,
because you've
yeah,
been pulled in as part of a management consultancy. So
yeah,
there's this contradiction there that actually you need to trust a 5-year BA or somebody who's just come out of university 6 months ago.
yeah, yeah,
And I just feel that that's such a conflict there. And if
yeah.
organisations can trust those teams of people, then they could place that kind of trust on the people they know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it does come down to that having our sort of our genuine flex again. It's that thing that's
Yeah,
talking like a teenager when I'm talking when I'm talking about having a flex, but it's about having that thing that is actually it's what's the stuff that we should be showing off about?
yeah,
What's the stuff that we need to be shouting about and
yeah,
saying, right, this is the stuff that we're really good at, um, and 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 being able to, as you say, it's not just about senior BAs with 5 years experience going in and doing that strategic stuff. It's a skill set
yeah,
of understanding problems. It's about communicating. It's about communicating with stakeholders. It's about understanding. It's about methodologies, regardless of what that methodology is, and being
mm,
comfortable with that. But I also talk about when we talking about methodologies and some of those techniques. And I think this is probably something that maybe management consultancies do better than we as BAs do. Is that we almost need to be sort of use them by stealth. So rather than announcing to everyone, right, I'm going to use a fishbone diagram in this.
yeah,
We use the techniques without necessarily announcing them,
yeah,
and we use them by stealth. And I think
yeah,
doing that, it starts to then build up our credibility about it's not just
yeah.
about applying techniques, it's about having that deeper understanding of,
It
of what it is.
becomes less geeky, doesn't it? If you
Yeah,
just sort
yeah,
of do
absolutely.
it and use it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's almost
yeah,
then it's like voodoo magic that these guys are
yeah.
doing, and we don't quite know how they're
Yeah.
doing, but we like it.
I
Yeah,
call it being a ninja. It's being a
yeah,
ninja BA. It's like you
yeah,
do your
yeah,
forward roll like Tom
yeah,
Cruise in Mission Impossible, and
yeah,
it's about doing it by stealth, I think. And
yeah,
yeah, it is.
yeah,
Then it makes it more.
yeah,
It's not about applying a technique. It's
yeah,
about having a skill set that
yeah.
that enables you to solve problems.
Yeah, no, I like that. One of the things I've joked about in the past is that often as BAs we can sort of pick up the babok, we can wave it around. We go, no, 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 no. This is how we've got
Yeah,
to do it, and the business sort of look and you go, well, that's nice, but we're over here, like
yeah,
we're doing this thing, and
yeah,
that's lovely, but you just stay away,
yeah,
because we want to solve some things. I think, and to tie something else you said into this strategic role, which I think might be helpful, it's this bridging the gap between business and IT. It's this stereotype that came out of the 80s, maybe late 70s, and so that sort of tag has stuck with
yeah,
us. That's what people think our flex is, right? And so
yeah,
maybe we have to rebrand our value proposition. But I mean it's a phrase that I've picked on for many years because I think it's very limiting. Just
yeah,
having that, it anchors us down in this stereotype role. And I was thinking today, like, if we do processes right, processes are central to everything we do. It's the rules, it's the data, it's the people, it's the organization, and all of that stuff comes together in there. So if we do processes and we do process improvement, and during that process improvement, we change some of the responsibilities. So those rectangles move swim lanes or whatever's like happening there. But we change boundaries of departments, we change responsibilities of people, we probably change the performance of that process. It needs to perform more effectively, more efficiently. So we speed it up, we make it leaner. And then I start thinking, well, that changes people's jobs descriptions, right? That changes their performance contracts with their KPIs and things, how they're measured. So why aren't we the bridge between business and HR? Because that's where all that stuff gets changed. If projects are about that outcome, about those business benefits, why aren't we the bridge between business and results? It's like we need that holistic thinking. Like the purpose of us doing this is not to build that tool. That tool is actually something along the way to something bigger. right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it's that thinking of it's probably where we started. It's that thinking of what the end is. So the end is a business outcome. It's not it's not necessarily a new IT system.
Yeah.
It's a business outcome which encompasses all of that, and I think that's where so our skills and our abilities to understand that and to be the sort of the expert in that change, which encompasses HR, which encompasses operations, which encompasses legal, regulatory, marketing. So all the different. So we've got the octopus tentacles again, reaching into all those different departments that we might have in an organisation, that give that complete business outcome, which isn't just about a new IT system.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's going to be so fascinating to see how this develops. I mean, I'm going to have a few of these conversations. It's been great talking to you and hearing some of these ideas, these projections. Almost, maybe we are projecting a future by getting this sort of collective thinking together. But it's going to be so fascinating to see how this does. I think, as you say, it's sort of going to be the same job, just in a slightly different time and place, right?
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me, Vicky. It's been fantastic talking with you.
No, thanks, Joe. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool. And we'll chat soon. Cheers. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Bye bye.